Oh, that's not good.
I don't know what happened.
We'll see if mine's ended. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Is this thing on? Can you hear me?
It is on.
You can all hear me? Can our online audience hear us?
Yes, we can.
Oh.
Yes.
Yes, we can. That sounds like Bob the Builder, for those of you who know Bob.
He can fix it.
All right, we're ready. Good morning.
Good morning.
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 Welcome to Christian Public Leader. We may have some echoing voices here today as we work with technology. That's always a fun part of the world that we are courageously forging ahead into, and you will certainly be a part of that as a Christian Public Leader. And hopefully we can learn together as we navigate what it means to be here in the flesh with all of you as residential students or commuter students that are here this morning, as well as those who are joining us via live stream this morning. Everybody turn and wave to your classmates. The camera's right behind you there. And they will be joining us in real time. And then, of course, there will be other classmates that will view a recorded video of this as well. So multimodal, many different ways that we join together around this work of learning together. My name is Tim Coltford. I'm the Director of Contextual Learning here at Luther Seminary. I've been here 9 years now, serving in the role as director, which is kind of a dual faculty role, faculty and administration. And we'll be journeying with many of you in all of your field education experiences at Luther. And I co-teach this course with...
I'm Terry Elton. I'm Associate Professor of Leadership, and I get the privilege of joining in Christian Public Leader, as well as teaching a variety of the leadership courses. This semester, in fact, I'm teaching the signature course, Leading Christian Communities in Mission. So that's one of the courses that I teach, as well as a variety of electives. So that's a pretty fun deal. And we're joined with...
David Scherer, CPL coordinator. Hey, everybody.
And if you haven't met Dave, you'll get to talk with him sooner than later when it comes to your context. So with that, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, so one of the things we often like to lead with in our various gatherings is the mission of Luther Seminary. Why are we here? We always have to be asking that question of why. And we believe at Luther that our mission is to educate leaders for Christian communities. What is a Christian community? We want to learn from you. That's one of our postures as teachers in this place, is that we're continually learning, we're continually listening, and we know that you're going into the primary places of theological education that is unfolding before our very eyes. We know the landscape is changing faster than we can keep up, We heard from interns who just came back from a year-long internship and asking the question of how does seminary actually address what's going on in the context around us? So this connection to our partners in ministry, in context, is vital for the learning exchange. And so we're glad to be a part of that with all of you. Educating leaders for Christian communities. One of the ways that we've come at this, as my clicker is not working, and well, we might just focus on the mission for a while. One of the ways that we are coming at this constructively in terms of the curriculum at Luther Seminary is something that we call Christian Public Leader. Christian Public Leader is a number of courses, 4 of them in fact, that are available to students at Luther. First, all students coming in as MDiv and MA students, you'll be taking the first 2 Christian Public Leader as signature courses. So all students will be taking these. In many ways, it's an onboarding course for you here at Luther Seminary. It's going to be a little bit different than the other courses that you're taking, and that is by design. It's our hope that you have a place, I like to call it a holding space, where you're able to have holy conversations tending to your own soul, to your own spiritual formation, as well as your vocational leadership formation, as well as doing some really practical leadership in the front lines of ministry in a context. So the hope for all of you is that you will find a place with real people, peers that you're walking alongside in small groups where you can do life together. And we find that this has really been a fruitful way to kind of integrate all that you're doing while you're in your seminary experience here at Luther. So very briefly about the curricular arc of our Christian Public Leader courses. The first one that you are in today is called Who Am I as a Christian Public Leader? There should not be an answer to that entirely on this first day, and we're hoping that part of this course is about the adventure of discovering more fully about yourself internally, as well as how you're going to be leading in your various contexts, whether you're already in one now or you're going to be finding one in the next several weeks. Who Am I as a Christian Public Leader is an opportunity for us to unpack some of the great gifts that are found within each of you. StrengthsFinder 2.0 is a practical leadership tool that we use in Who Am I as a Public Leader. And it's a great opportunity to name and claim your strengths, the assets that you bring to personal relationships, to your professional relationships. The idea of seeing a bigger scope of what it means to work on a team with people that have various strengths. It might be very different than yours, but when you put them together, you start to see how you can work together as a team. Another piece of this course, and we're going to unpack the syllabus more fully in just a moment, but another piece that's important is something that you've probably read a lot about, emotional intelligence. By the end of the semester, we're going to do a deep dive with Mark Sunby from LeaderWise, which was formerly North Central Ministry Development Center. They do all the MMPIs for anybody entrancing candidacy here in Region 3. Mark comes and speaks with us about emotional intelligence and how it impacts our own understanding of self, around self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, the things that we bring to our ministry relationships. So invaluable knowing of oneself and how we show up in ministry. The second semester, SG 0502, you see, is called Being Public Leaders in a Public Church. Most of you will journey on in the spring semester to take that course consecutively after this. In fact, we have our professor who will be there, Mary Hess, over here on the right. And we're so glad she's rejoining us after a couple of years away of study and teaching. And she is passionate about what it means to be a public leader and she will be leading you in that course. Just a very brief word, the tool that we use, practical leadership tool, is something called the IDI, Intercultural Development Inventory, where you might know yourself, again, more fully as an intercultural leader. What does that mean? What does that look like? Have you been asking those deep introspective questions about how we show up in culture and begin to assess and read a culture? Invaluable tools that comes away from that course. You'll each get a one-on-one assessment on how that plays out in your life and where are some areas that you can stretch and grow. And it's our hope that we're going to be sending leaders from Luther Seminary into churches, communities, faith-based nonprofits, where you're willing to ask those hard questions that move us from cultures of sameness to cultures of difference. The last two CPL courses, FE 0523 and 0524, for any MDivs in the room, these are going to be electives for you. They're going to be opportunities after you meet the signature courses where you're going to have opportunities for electives, and 0523, 0524 is increasingly becoming some popular opportunities for those MDiv students. For MA students in our professional degrees, children, youth, and family, or community care, those of you in the professional degrees will be taking the whole 4-semester arc as a part of your degree program. So 0523 is on systems and leading change. Don Allitz, our Director of Lifelong Learning, will be teaching that this semester for many of our students. And then the final semester is 0524, lifelong learners and leaders. What does it mean to be a lifelong learner and bring that into your habits, into your ministry beyond graduation here at Luther? So we're very excited about what's been developing here in the curriculum since some revision work done in 2013. And we hope that you are going to enjoy and get the richness out of this journey along the way. I'd like to invite Professor Elton up to talk a little bit more about the ecology of CPL and how it impacts you as you're going through seminary.
So as Tim said, this course is a little different than other courses. If you look in your syllabus, there's this triangle. And today, the first Thursday of the month, is the little part at the top of the triangle. We have basically 3 months, 3 units in this course. We kick it off on these Thursdays where we're here all together, either virtually or in the space, or watch this video. We introduce the theme, and then you go into 2 different precept times in this month, where you process what's going on, and the rest of the time, the bulk of the time, rather than having you read a bunch of things, we have you engaging in real living communities that are messier than all get out, that kind of are the point of why you're in seminary, hopefully anyway, all right? But I want to talk about how does this all come together? This is a complicated course, and there's a bigger ecology that we're kind of working within. So instead of having you guess what we're thinking, we're just going to tell you. Concept, huh? Anyway, I like to do that in courses. It's kind of fun. We live at the intersection of these 3 formations. We know that theological education is a formative process. We can do it on the side, or we can do it in the heart. And one of the places we're explicitly dealing with this formation at Luther Seminary is in these 2 CPL courses. You're also, for those of you that are going to internship or in the other 2 CPLs for the MAs, those are other places, right? Or CPE that happens. But we're looking at 3 different formations that come into conversation. We recognize, we're going to say more about this later, that you are a spiritual person and you show up in classes and you still bring that with you, right? You don't leave it at the door. You're not just a head sitting in here, right? So we want to take that seriously here. So in your precept time, you're going to do a spiritual practice. It may be the same one. Your precept leaders are prepared to work that with you, and it's their freedom to do that and to make that fit for each of your groups. But we're going to just pause and invite God into this process and acknowledge that we're all on this spiritual journey together, okay? Second is, we're going to talk about leadership. We're not going to give you a lot of theory about leadership. We're going to give you some tools to reflect on your own leadership. But we want this to be a space for you early on in your time here at Luther Seminary to be thinking about how have you and are you being formed and shaped as a Christian public leader, okay? So before we even bombard you with theory on leadership, we want to give you space to be talking about that. How'd you get here? Your first month is going to be talking about your call story, and you guys have really interesting call stories, right? You all didn't get here in a direct line, and God didn't all just send go to Luther Seminary or, you know, be a pastor, or some of you that might have happened, right? But most of you went like this, right? And did a lot of really interesting things. And so talking about what's that leadership formation look like. And then the third thing is this thing called call, our vocational formation. Some of you are juggling many kind of commitments around that. I feel like I'm called to this, this, and this, and I don't know how they fit together. That's me most of the time, right, Mary? Right? Some of us are like, I feel called to the church, but I feel called to seek in my community. I feel called to be with my family, and I have some particular needs of that right now, while I'm also feeling called to be in this particular community and lead. That's the kind of juggling that we're always doing about vocational formation. And so these three come together in CPL, and your precepts are the primary place that you're going to be working that out, but we're going to put some seeds, plant some seeds in these large group sessions, and then we're going to know that in your context that's also happening. I want to also note that we are not ignorant to what else is going on around you. This is not the only place this is happening. You have, some of you are deeply connected to congregations or faith communities, whether you're leading or they're just forming and shaping, you just worship there. Those are places. Some of you have ones at home that you have left that are still praying for you and supporting you while you're also here, right? Those are more than one kind of community. So we recognize, especially around spiritual and leadership formation, those are a part of that. We know some of you are in candidacy or have a group of people from your church walking with you, thinking about your leadership and your spiritual formation. We want that to be a great one to recognize that and acknowledge that. We're not taking the place of that, but anytime that we can help navigate that, we're grateful for that. We know that there are friends and mentors and people that aren't officially a part of CPL that are influencing in your life. And we're grateful for those, and we hope those that continue. But I don't know about you, I can never have too many mentors in my life. And so for you to have a contextual mentor for this semester, for this course, is hopefully an add-on. Or it's maybe somebody that's had a role for you before that's gonna jump into and say some things, act differently because of this class. You're gonna have some more reflective time together. And we hope that you're in Bible studies and worship and in spiritual conversations with people outside of this course, maybe outside of Luther Seminary, that are also forming and shaping you. So we're looking at that circle in the middle and where the three overlap, but we're also acknowledging all those things around you. With that, here we go.
All right.
And of course, it's
Everybody
mine that
dance.
I
We got
turned
music.
off. Outside ecology influencing.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. Living in a world of distractions. Do you have your syllabus in front of you? If not, you will find it on the Moodle page, My LutherNet, where we have our course page location, where you will find all of the things that you need for this course. We want to briefly walk through this together and field any questions. One of the things you'll find on the cover of all of our syllabi is the place that we meet, who you can follow up with, where you can find us in terms of our offices. Both Professor Elton and I are here in Northwestern Hall, so we're both on the president's wing. I'm right below the president's office, and Terry is up on that second floor on the other hallway, so you can find us there and track us down. Dave Schur is also down in our contextual learning suite hallway, back by the business office, so feel free to come and find us there. We have a lot of treats, actually, candy for anybody here on campus. You find the course description there. This is about being in the midst of particular communities and their distinct contextual realities. One of the phrases we often use here is the context is the primary text in Christian Public Leader courses. You are not going to be overwhelmed with long readings, hundreds of pages each week. Rather, you are going to be encouraged to take on this commitment of 5 hours a week minimum, up to what many people are doing, especially our DL students, maybe 20, 30, 40 hours a week in context. Whatever the case may be, our goal is that this course would be primarily about reading the context as your primary text. And we're going to work with you on developing the muscle memory that is needed for being reflective theologians. How can we help one another in reflecting deeply on what God is up to in everyday ministry encounters, and yes, even the juggling that goes on with families and the various commitments that we have. So as you look at this course, Who Am I as a Leader, all of our Christian Public Leaders courses follow these learning outcomes. So this will be your first time of looking at these. Students will be able to participate in and lead action, reflection, praxis as they critically reflect upon how close listening to self and context inform the ways in which they witness to God's activity in the world. We will be using a particular tool after you share your call narratives with one another in precept group this month. We're going to introduce an action reflection tool that you'll be using for your precept papers throughout the rest of the semester. Students will develop the capacity to contextualize theology, theory, and practices of ministry within a particular community. It's our hope that the lecture that we give each month and the topic that we set is going to help give you some nuggets, some theology and theory to put into conversation with your context as the primary text. Students will integrate theology, theory, and practices for missional leadership in a particular community. Students will describe their intellectual and vocational formation as a theologian in context. Students will be able to competently lead ministries in their area of concentration. And lastly, students will deepen their understanding of themselves as Christian public leaders, be able to critically reflect on themselves as leaders, and inhabit reflective and spiritual practices of a lifelong learner. Is everybody ready to do this? Six outcomes. We'll just knock them right out. This is this is actually an ongoing process, and we hope and pray that these outcomes will actually be part of the rhythm of your whole lifelong ministry. And so we set them out as noble goals for this course, and we're going to have some very tangible and concrete ways to go after those together. I just briefly want to walk through the schedule. We put a helpful grid in here. You will find that as well on Moodle, the Moodle page, which is so helpful now in terms of just seeing what's happening from week to week as you kind of check down week 1, week 2. It takes you right through the 13 weeks. We've also put a grid here that is divvied up by the months that we are meeting. So you always know first Thursday of the month we'll be joining for lecture, and then that next Thursday you'll be in precept group, and then the last Thursday you'll be in precept group as well. You can see that we have the theme, Who Am I as a Leader, with the introductory piece on this particular month, and then you will go to your assigned precept group meetings in the following. October 5th, we talk about what it means to be a reflective Christian public leader in context, and we're going to get into that action reflection tool that I mentioned just a moment ago. And we'll briefly touch on that this morning, but be focused more intently on it next month. The third month of November, Discovering Your Strengths for Ministry, is where we're going to bring in our colleague in contextual learning, Karen Gieske. And Karen is a Gallup-trained Strength Finder coach, and she's going to do some work with you as you'll be doing the inventory in advance of our class with the Strength Finder book that you have as a part of your course books for this year. And then we're going to walk through that with you with some fun exercises that day of self-discovery. Precepts again the next couple of weeks, and then we are going to be wrapping up in December on the 7th with emotional intelligence for ministry with our guest from LeaderWise coming to join us. So with that, I am going to have Professor Elton just share a little bit about those precept papers that I mentioned. They're really the core activity that's going to happen alongside of your spiritual formation practices in precept group. And they have a rubric. They have kind of chart to follow, and so too for the papers. So, Terry.
I'm going to talk about the precept papers and then your final. Okay, so those are the two parts that I'm going to highlight of the syllabus. Precepts papers are about 2 to 4 pages in length. Whenever we give you a page length, it's double spaced. So if you're wondering about that, it should say that in there. But there's one change that's been made to your syllabus on this. Rather than emailing them to your precept leaders, those can be just posted in your precept Moodle site, and then they can download them there. Moodle is new for us, and our precept leaders couldn't have access to my LuthorNet precept groups, but they can to Moodle. So if you just post them there, then they can get into those, and you don't have to worry about their email and it getting lost and everything. And those should be posted before you're going to present them. So the deal is this. There are anywhere from 4 to 7 of you in precepts. Half of you will present your precept paper the first or the second week of the month, and the other half of you will present the 4th week of the month. All right. If you have a sense of, if you don't know who that is, you can email your precept leaders. They're to contact you by tomorrow. They've been assigned, they know now which precept they have and those kinds of things. So that will be coming in the next week. But the deal is, at least by the day before, post your precept paper in that place. And so they have it ahead of time. Your precept leaders are going to then give you feedback on those precept papers around the assignment. The first one is basically a way to get to know each other, share your call story, and connect with the learning pastoral imagination research that we're going to talk about today. But the next two, month 2 and 3, are to use these 4 questions of Osmer, which we're going to tell you about more next time. And then one of those 2 papers, based on your feedback, is going to get turned into us to be graded. All right? This is a pass-fail class, so you have to pass. You don't have to get the maximum points. What we want to do is we want to use those 4 questions to help you become a reflective leader. The idea is not that you get really good at a paper. The goal is you get really good at reflecting on leadership experience in light of those 4 questions. So they're going to give you feedback from there. You can adapt any of those papers, and then you're going to turn it in the regular Moodle site for Tim and I as one of your grading things that we will use for your grade or for your passing. If you look to the back of your syllabus, there is a rubric on how we will distribute the points for those. All right. So precept papers, those are the 4 questions. There's 5 points for each section. It's 20 points. That's how it is, right? The precept leaders have this, so they're going to give you feedback on, I didn't see you integrating theology into this, or I didn't see you integrating any of the theory from your class. As you will note, this is a draft syllabus. One of the things that's missing on there is a sample paper. We'll give that for you for the next month. You don't have to worry about that till month 2. All right, we adapted a little bit the one that we used last year to have it be a little clearer for you on how to do that. All right, so precept papers, what Tim and I are going to do for when you turn it into us is on this. So your job is to work on that in precepts, give feedback from your precept leader to get that piece put together. And if you look at your calendar, that is due in November. We used to do a midterm, and we decided we wanted to give you more time. So that is due Monday, November 20th, the week of Thanksgiving. So in that break, right, as you go on to break, that's when it'll be turned in. All right? Now, the second thing I want to talk about is your final paper. And this also has a rubric. You'll see that is the final one on there. But let me just highlight what we're hoping to do. This is a 3 to 5 page paper, and it's answering the question, what have you learned about who you are as a Christian public leader in light of the theological and theoretical concepts laid out in this class, right? In light of strength finders, in light of emotional intelligence, in light of thinking about yourself theologically as a Christian public leader. Theologically thinking about Christian public leader is different than saying I'm a pastor or I'm a youth director. That's a role, right? We're gonna introduce you to that today. What does it mean to think theologically about being a leader, being a Christian public leader, both in a particular community and as a wider call? So we want you to do that, to take into account what we talked about, the readings of this class, the different things you talked about in your precept groups. We want to engage with the leadership tool, which will be strength finders in this class, to look at those outcomes that Tim said, and where have you moved? Where have you shifted from today to December, right? And then finally, what are you learning about yourself from reading in context? Okay, those are the things we want you to answer in that. And those will be due in December 8th. So that will be your final. That will be the wrap up. Okay, that's what I got.
Hello, welcome to the no shame zone. I'm gonna ask a question, and without shame, you're gonna answer it, okay? How many of you have totally picked your CPL site and you know exactly who it is and you're all set to go? Okay, a couple of you, okay, good. No shame for those of you who haven't done it yet. But within the next few weeks, our goal is that you are adult learners and that you will go seek out a community here locally where you can go be a learner. And Tim always says you're a guest in this space, so your job is to listen, learn, lead, in that order. So our hope is that you'll find a site. It can be a nonprofit, it could be an urban church, it could be a rural church, suburban church, any sort of faith-based organization, but you're seeking out a mentor, somebody who you want to glean their wisdom and you want to spend time with them. And you're going to meet with your mentor 1 to 2 times a month. You're going to do reflective work together, kind of like the stuff that Terry talked about, where they're going to hopefully name God's activity in your life a little bit, help you get on the balcony and say, what the heck am I doing? Where am I going? Where is God leading me? They're going to help you through that work. It's a minimum of 5 hours a week in your context. So you can get if you get a paid CYF position, children, youth, and family, that's great. That could potentially be your CPL site. But here's the deal, though. You have until October 4th to draft this learning agreement together. This is a covenant that you all are going to do together, where you're going to figure out some goals for yourself, some learning goals, as well as just, how often are we going to meet, those kind of things. So that's due October 4th. So work your way back and realize you're going to have to do some holy nagging. That's one of the skills that we're learning, is how to nag leaders, because this is a mentee-initiated process. This is not the mentor dragging you along with them. This is you saying, hey, I know you're a busy leader, but yo, tend to me here. I got some stuff I got to do. That's a skill to learn, right, as a leader. So this is part of the learning. I would say if you can start to track this thing down by, September 15th, that will give you a 2-week window to try to coordinate your schedules, get together, and draft the learning agreement together. Then you're going to do work together. Some of it's going to be awesome. Some of it is going to maybe not work out as well. T.S. Eliot says that everyone gets the experience and some get the lesson. And our goal is that you'll get the lesson. And so then you'll get a chance to do a reflective assessment.
We already have some of that going on online. Some have already started and
good.
Are already learning on that, David.
That's beautiful. That's what we want. There's no such thing as failure. There's only such thing as failure to learn, right? So we're hoping that you'll do the reflective work with your mentor, and by December 15th, you will do a reflective assessment together. So you'll say, hey, did we get together as many times as we said we were going to? What was helpful? What wasn't helpful? This is a chance for both of you to give some feedback. So any questions about all of that? One person had asked about what type of site should I be seeking out? And we always talk about, in contextual learning, we always talk about the value of displacement. So if you're like, I'm an urban ministry person and I just know I'm going to do that for the rest of my life, that's great. But what's cool about this is a chance for a holding space, as Tim talks about, for you to go try something else. The stakes are lower than, when you're on internship and you're diving in, 40 hours a week and it's really intense. This is a chance for you to say, let me see if clinical pastoral work might be in the cards for me. Let me go see how that feels. If you're in discernment about whether you're going to do MDiv or MA, this is a chance to do some of that discernment work. If you go and you just totally hate being with people, you're like, oh, maybe I'm a biblical scholar instead. This is all a chance to figure that out. So take this opportunity to do that. So any questions about that process? If you have any questions or you're like, I need a good idea of a really great site, feel free to email me. My email should be on the syllabus. We'll hook you up. All right? Cool? Yeah.
I noticed that there are some sites hosted on the CPL section online. And is there, because some of us are new in town, and is there a program of introductions for us to get to know these churches, or do we have to go ourselves?
So yes, that's a great question. So, there's the CPL site list, and we had some technical difficulties at one point. I don't know if you all saw it when it was, but in the beta testing. But now it's good. You should see all the sites on there. And our hope is that we're just curators. That's our job. We're trusting that you're the adult leaders who are going to dive in, get to know someone, and reach out to them. And this is, again, part of leadership. However, we also have another track that's going, because some students are coming from entirely different countries where they're just getting their feet on the ground and figuring out, okay, what am I doing? We actually have the first semester is called the Discovery Preset. And so we're actually visiting different ministry sites so they can kind of adjust to life here. But for the rest of you, we're hoping you'll dive in and you'll embrace this opportunity. That answer your question, hopefully? Okay.
Is there a maximum number of students who can be in context at the same site? Or is there a recommended number so that it doesn't become sort of oversaturated with CPL students?
Great question. So we actually, that's one of the questions we ask on our CPL mentor application. So for the mentor. So for those sites who have multiple students, they've actually told us we have a max capacity of 4 or 6 or 2. And so that's usually on the mentor, and then you'll figure that out. Either the site will be full when you try to apply online, or when you call them up and they say, we already have 2, sorry, we can't take any more. Does that make sense? Cool. Yeah.
We have questions online. How do they know if their contextual mentor, pastor, person has filled out the paperwork and that that's all complete?
So usually, on a good day, I will usually send a confirmation email within 3 to 4 days of when that person has filled out the application. So if you haven't if your mentor claims to have filled out this mentor application and you haven't received a confirmation email from me within, let's call it 5 to 6 days over the weekend, over the Labor Day weekend, but then let me know, because something went wrong there. Maybe it was our technology, maybe they didn't hit the button that they thought they hit, but usually I'm on it within a day or 2, but sometimes a little more. That makes sense? So you'll get a confirmation email, you'll get more information. One more thing to lift up is that if you have a mentor and you know you're going to be working with them, we have a CPL Mentor Launch Day training tomorrow. So I know that's not much warning for the students, and we're always having to figure out how early to have the training versus you all have to dive into context. But it's going to be this Friday from 9 to 11 tomorrow morning. You don't have to attend, but we're hoping that they will attend either online, in person, or they can watch the video afterwards, which is maybe what a lot of your mentors have to do. So cool. All right, I'm up. Here we go. So we get to share our call narratives, and this is fun. And I was asked to share mine, and I'm always excited to talk about my story if you'll listen. So, and you don't have a choice; you have to listen to me. So my journey is one of growing up, and I grew up in a house that did not explicitly name. We're Christians and this is important to us. I didn't hear that a lot growing up. And so, in fact, I heard some demonization of Christians. Christians were the ones who, hated gay people and hated science, and they were mean. And I heard some of that language growing up. And so that was kind of my image. And so I get into college And I meet this great guy, and he's just a wonderful person. And he says, hey, I want you to come to this little get-together we're having. Yeah, that's how they get you, right? So I say, sure, why not? So I show up to this thing. It was called Campus Crusade for Christ. And I come to the thing, and I'm hearing these people, and they're singing. And they're singing about God's love and God's grace. And they love each other, and they love me. And it's because God first loved them. And when I was in this space with these folks over the next few months, it was like I fell into the arms of God. And I remember vividly just hearing this voice and feeling this presence and God just saying, I am with you. And it was so clear to me. It's like, I am with you. And I was waiting for more, and that's all I got. But I was waiting for like, and your life will be perfect now, because that's not what happened. But there was this sense of this, like, that God was going to be with me, whatever happened. And so I had this sense with me as I went about my life and started making music that reflected this gratitude of God's presence in my life. And there was a guy who was in charge of the Lutheran Youth Organization, the National Lutheran Youth Organization. He got a hold of this CD that I had made, and he said, hey, I want you to come to Puerto Rico for your first gig, right? But not a bad first gig, right? He says, I want you to come down there and lead some music. I'm like, sure, why not? And at that point, I was still kind of sorting out things. So, I'm like, are there going to be cute girls there? Okay, I'll go. So, I'm still like, okay, sure, I guess. So I show up to this thing. I do my thing. I start rapping. And he talks to me later, and he says, you have gifts. And God is going to use you to do good things in the world. And I was like, really? I'm a college kid. I have no idea what I want to do or be. And he basically planted those seeds for me for ministry. So then I fast forward. I get a nice job at the largest Lutheran church in the world at the time. And, I got the benefits and, everything's hunky-dory. But this call never went away. And so I was doing an event. There was a young person who came up to me and handed me a note. And the note said, basically, your music, like, reminded me that I have a reason to live, basically. And I was like making sure my hair was in place, I was like, hey, did I do a good job? And meanwhile, God is like, this is so much bigger than you and your own feelings of inadequacy. And I'm like, but God, like, I swear a lot. Like, I have a big ego. Like, I chase girls. Like, why would you use me? Just this real feeling of inadequacy. But then I just took this note, and I just carried this note with me all the time. They're like, get over yourself. I can use anybody. And I just held this with me all the time, and this became like a sign to me. So then, I ended up, shortly after that experience, I call up my mom. I'm like, hey, Mom, you know how I got this nice little job with benefits, and it pays me regularly and all that stuff? I'm totally going to quit all that and go be a Christian rapper. Mom, are you there? Hello? And so that was a long time ago. And in the, I believe, 17 years since I did that, I've been able to pay my bills, and, God has provided, and I was able to make a living as a Christian rapper. Who knew? And, as a Lutheran rapper, in the Lutheran rap world, when I first decided to go into that, was not what it is now. It was not the booming industry. It was much different. So anyway, so that's been my experience, and then God brought me here through the power of the Holy Spirit, through a very convincing person. And so now here I am to share with you all. So one of the things that you'll notice, there's kind of this trope that's found in biblical narratives for call stories. And so this guy, Norman Habel, kind of talks about this form of a story. Now, this may not be, this isn't a linear thing, right? But a lot of our stories are going to have these elements to them. A lot of our stories will have some kind of a divine encounter, right? At some point, God encountered you all, you encountered God, something happened, some kind of a connection. And is the clicker working? Did I? Mess up something. There we go. And it's not always recognized as a divine encounter right away, right? Like when Pastor, by the way, the National Lutheran Youth guy, his name is Kelly Chapman. He's now my pastor. He's been my pastor for a long time. But when he asked me to come down to Puerto Rico, I didn't recognize that as, oh, God is calling me to go to Puerto Rico. That's not how I was talking about it. So it's often that we look back, right? When God tells Moses, hey, Moses, I'm going to pass by and all you're going to see is my backside. And I think a lot of times in our journey, it's like, God, I can't see you. I can't see. Oh, there you are. And we look back and we can see very clearly how God is at work. And sometimes these theophany moments are dramatic and sometimes they're a lot more subtle. Just like, hey, you want to come down and rap for a minute? You know, that kind of thing. Then there's this introductory word, right? In Moses, in Exodus 3, it was this I am, Aya Asher Aya, which is, it can be translated, I am that which causes being, or even more simply put, I am presence, right? So when I heard I am with you, that's kind of what that is. And so sometimes that Shekinah cloud comes down. Like for me, it was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. When, you know, the first time I performed, I was like, this is, I think, how I'm wired. This is part of why I'm on the planet. So you get that introductory word. And then there's the co-mission, right? God calls us to join God's mission and we don't do it alone. So God says, yo, I'm going to give you Aaron, right? Aaron's going to help you. I know you feel inadequate, but don't worry, you're not doing this all alone. There will be others that will come alongside you and help you in this work. And so when Kelly said, you know, God's going to use you in big ways, that was this community of voices. And so we have to name that. Those of us who work with others too, we have to name those gifts that we see in others. Because it's like telling a fish that they swim well, and the fish is like, what's swimming? I have no idea what swimming is. Like, we need to name that. So then there's the objection, right? We hear this over and over again. And for Jeremiah, it's do not say I am too, and he says I am too young, but I think we can fill in our own blank. Do not say I'm too old, too dumb, too biblically illiterate, too vulgar, too weak, too shy, too female, too black, too white, too sinful. You know, I think we have all kinds of excuses, right? And so then, and Mary says, how can this be? Right? Moses says, yo, I'm not a great talker. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but, you know, and then I had my sort of objection. And so, and then sometimes the very thing that we use as the excuse is the exact thing that God uses. So sometimes if we say like, some folks say like, I have an ego. Well, ego strength, like the ability to like feel like what you have to say actually matters to the world. That's actually can be a strength that others don't have. And God can actually even use that. Crazy how that works. But then there's the reassurance. So then in the middle of the uncertainty, there's some kind of comfort that comes to us. So, and sometimes God has to come back a second time, amen? So you think about Elijah, right? Elijah, the angel comes, says, get up, for this journey is too much. Boom, arise, you know? And he gives him a cake baked over hot coals. And Elijah takes the cake. He's like, hey, thanks, angel. That came out of nowhere and produced bread, but I'm going to go back to sleep and be depressed. Right? Good try, God. I'm going back to sleep. And then so the angel comes again, and this time the angel touches him and gives him this biscuit, and he feeds on this biscuit for 40 days and 40 nights, and it's awesome. But we need that second time sometimes. And then oftentimes we live in this objection and reassurance. And objection, reassurance, objection, reassurance, right? Can you guys relate to this? And this isn't going to go away in seminary. Just because you said yes, there's still going to be some, really? Really? Are you sure? Are you sure? And then more comfort. So that's kind of how that works. And then there's this sign a lot of times. So whether it's a rainbow or a baby, right? A baby shall be a sign, or a staff, or a note from a suicidal kid that you keep in your pocket and keep pulling out when you need that strength. So there are these physical, tangible signs of God's presence. So hold on to that, right? Whatever that sign is, like keep that note in your pocket, whatever that might be, that little reminder that, you know what, you're in the right place. God can use you just as you are. So, and then Mark Thronvite adds one more, which is acceptance. He adds that to this trope. And Paul Tillich talks about accepting our acceptance, right? Sometimes we just have to say, okay, this is actually who I am. Like, I am actually a beloved child of the Most High God who's called to proclaim God's love to the world. Like, okay, here I am, Lord, send me. Or Mary, my soul proclaims your greatness. All right, I get it. I give up. And this is where we can be the craziest to people that don't get it. Like, really? You're going to go quit your job and go try to be a rapper? And good luck with that. So this is where we need each other, right? When you're feeling crazy, you're feeling like, why? Like, you're going to go to have you looked at the statistics? Have you read the Pew Research? Like, what are you doing? You're walking into death. This is where we need each other to say, you're not crazy, you're on the right track. And so that's part of what these precept groups are about, is we have to do this in community, and you'll get a chance to share your story with each other, to receive, affirmation of your call, hopefully. And let's name the gifts that we see in this room. You have amazing precept leaders. We've put together a group of folks who are incredible that will give you all kinds of wisdom. And you have a lot of wisdom to share with each other. So I'm excited to see what God does with you all this year. So that's all I got.
Let me go then.
Yeah, you go.
You guys, there's 26 students online from places like North Pole, Alaska, Colombia, and other really places, Fargo. So anyway, thanks. We're having a great conversation and good questions. So we have these courses called Christian Public Leader. What the heck is a Christian Public Leader? Just say it once, maybe twice, right now.
What is a Christian public leader?
That's right. We use that term all along, and we thought we should tell you what we think about it. How's that? Only fair. There are 1,012,000 like 3-letter things that are used around Luther Seminary, and this is one of them. We shifted several years ago from using other language to Christian Public Leader for 2 reasons. One is what I said earlier, is a lot of the things like ordained ministry or whatever, it's a subcategory of something else, right? And I don't know about you, but there are a few people that have been more than one kind of Christian public leader in their lifetime. And ordained ministry is one of them, but there's been others. And often it was like people felt like, well, I'm not that, so who am I in this conversation? Or it was the other way around, right? If I'm called to lead a nonprofit, and am I less than it? So Christian public leader is the overall phrase that we say for all of us that are here in theological education. Tim's a Christian public leader, Dave, when I am, you are. I'm a full-time teacher. That's a weird thing, right? I tell people on planes, I'm a teacher, and then they ask what, I teach graduate school, what topic, leadership, and then they push me, where? And then I have to go, pastors and lay people in the church, Christians, and they go, what? Tell me what that is. And then I have to get into this church stuff, right? I'm a public leader, right? And I don't just teach any grad school leadership. I bring faith and God and theology into conversation with theory and practice. And so part of what we want to do is talk about what do we mean by this. So this might be you right now, but this is not going to be you at the end of the next 10 minutes. How's that? I want to start by there's a reason that there's a C first. I've been around theological education. My first class in theological education is before some of you were born, I'm sorry to say that, but in 1987. And I remember people saying, I felt like I had a faith life and then I came to seminary. And they deconstructed stuff and I had to look at the Bible with these new lenses and stuff. And I just wanted to pray and go to worship. And now I see all this other stuff, right? Well, that can happen. But we want to hold up, and we will do our best in this class to say it more than once. You are first and foremost a beloved child of God, and God wants to be in relationship with you above all else. You're not graded on that. It doesn't matter if you can pass your Hebrew exam or if you can tell us about the ancient desert fathers of the Christian church, right? So what does it mean for you to be a Christian public leader that continues to tend to that relationship with the creator of the universe that created you? There are days that I get up and I go, I got nothing. And I got to show up and I got to do stuff. We heard yesterday of some of our returning seniors that showed up in hospital rooms and walked with people through death and say, I got nothing. But they showed up and God worked with and through them. And they trusted, and it was their faith in this amazing God that made this something totally different. So one of the things that I want to tell you, and I hope we're creating a little bit of space for, tend to your soul while you were here. And that may be putting away your darn books some nights and just doing something else. It may be not worshiping at your CPL site or your place that you have to work and going to someplace else and just letting God's music and the word from somebody else preach to you and go, thank you for filling my soul. It may be sitting in a dark room in your living room after everyone has gone to bed, yelling at God, going, why did you bring me to seminary? Really? Done that a few times, right? Okay. So one of the things that we highlight, and it's our understanding of leadership, a Christian public leader begins by being a follower, not a leader. I get to talk about this for almost 3 hours next Monday night in leading Christian communities in mission. But the idea is that who are you following? If you're here to get grades, put that aside for this. Let that be secondary to this. Maybe you're going to go on to get your PhD and those things matter to you. Yes. But make sure that's not your God you're following. You are part of a bigger mission. And that is not only following, it's listening to that God of the universe. And this Christian identity that we have is always becoming. At 53, I am not the same as 12. Thank goodness. But there are parts of me, the questions I have at 12 sometimes are still pop their head out. But I have a whole lot of other categories that I put in and a whole lot of other life experience. So what does it mean for you to lean into this faith, lean into being created in God's image, and go on this ongoing becoming journey? I have, like on my spiritual gifts inventory, or on strengths, anything you have, mercy, any of those, empathy, like bottom. Last gift. But you know what? I show up in hospital rooms and I show up in people's lives and I care for them. And I have fallen in love with particular aspects of pastoral care ministry. Because God has opened me up to say, you know, I don't have what it takes to show up. But I love and care for our students. I love and care for people in congregations. And that makes me show up. And that's an area that I continue to become. Not because of anything that I'm wired for, but because of what God's doing in me and because of what I believe we're, as Christian public leaders, called to do. Okay? So who are you following? And are you letting your soul become all that God has intended for you? Or are you limiting that by who you imagine you are? Second word, public. We in the West, anyway, have lived in a time that faith is a private thing. Faith is in the home. Faith is the kinds of things that is personal and it's your own decision and we can't judge each other. Right? It's something that we do separately. And I don't think that's helped us in the area of Christian ministry and certainly in Christian leadership. What does it mean for me to be Christian in public? Now you notice we haven't even added leadership to this sentence yet, or to this phrase yet. There were times this class last year, during the election, we had one of our biggest diverse classes enter Luther Seminary last fall. And in the midst of what was going on in our country, what did it mean for me to be a public Christian was tested many times, including in conversations in precepts with our students, not in a bad way. But what does it mean for me to show up in public? I have neighbors, I have friends, I have relatives that are marginalized people in our country, in our communities. What does it mean for me, out of what God has said, planted in my life, and how I believe we're to live, to be public about that? Because this is not easy, and there is no script. At least if you have one, could you send it my way? We are living off the map. And yet I know I'm called to love God and love my neighbor, and every day I have to figure out what that looks like. In public, not just in my home, not just with my friends. So when I get on the city bus and I'm riding that home and I see an injustice on the bus, do I say anything? Or do I just sit quiet? That is not about my leadership. That is about, I am called as a Christian to show up in public, to be God's hands and feet, to be the voice of the voiceless. And that whole public stuff is what we're going to talk about in the spring more deeply. But we want you to be reminded of this thing of being a Christian is a public calling. So what's the private part of that? You should have a private life. You should have time with God, time with an intimate community of people that follow with you. But you should not turn your Christianity off when you leave, right? And your heart should break as God's heart breaks when there's injustice in the world. I hate that sometimes. I would rather go to bed ignorant. But God has opened my eyes to see pain in the world, and as a Christian, I have to wrestle with what does that mean. So, what does it mean for you to think about your Christian life as one that's lived out loud, that shows up in the world, that shows up in public because of who God has called you to be? Finally, if I'm a Christian that's following God, I'm called to be in public, what then does leadership look like? We begin not only with following, but we begin our actual act of leading by listening. We, the West Church, have not done that very well over the years. We have gone in, we have the answer, or we have the way, right? Or you, by the end of this, will be so full of knowledge and theory that you are just anxious to go in and lead, and you say, I have the answer, folks, let's go. And they're going, wait, you don't even know us, right? All good enthusiasm. But what does it mean to join in what God is already doing? To join the stories, the lives of people that have faithfully been trying to do this work for a long time. And they may be tired, they may be at the end, they may be out of ideas, and they maybe need you to help with that imagination. But it starts by listening and building in a community and building those relationships. What would it mean if we were to say, God, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven? May we be part of your unfolding kingdom. As Dave was saying stories, there were times when, before I was at Luther, I've been here, I think, 13 years. I served 3 years in a synod office. As an assistant to the chapel. By Dave's running chapel. Okay. I served 3 years as an assistant to the bishop, and I served 16 years before that in a congregation, 6 of which were overseeing a nonprofit called Changing Church. Now, this was back in the 90s, and churches weren't changing some of them don't change very well now, but they certainly weren't doing that then. And so the irony of my going from director of Changing Church to assistant to the bishop was like, what, God? Really? I'm now the one holding all the regulations. I'm like supposed to do everything that, we literally, the St. Paul Area Synod had sanctioned 2 congregations for ordaining people that were outside of regulations. That's the time I stepped into the assistant to the bishop office, right? Regulatory, I felt like the assistant principal or something. But in all of that, there were so many days I'm like, God, why am I here? What am I doing? And somebody would call the synod office. Something was going on in their congregation and they were struggling. And we had a conversation, and at the end, literally, they would say, thank you for picking up the phone and being the one that I talked to. Like, okay, God, duh. Like, I'm like, really? Like, hit me over the head with something. But God had a bigger imagination for how God's kingdom was going to come. I'm like, really? Can your kingdom come through synod offices? Really? And God said, if you're there, it can. Right? That's the way we change things. That's the way so you're going to be called into all kinds of weird places to lead. And you may go, really, God? Of all places, Minnesota, you want me to live? It's cold there. Right? Those of you that need to know how to get winter clothing, and when we get, let us know. This is the semester to figure that out before J term. That would be good, right? But in all of that, what does it mean to open ourselves then to lead out of listening to God, to really care about what it means to be public, and then to be a follower of Jesus into the world and what God is already doing. One other thing I want to say about this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tim. You did not start being a Christian public leader when you started this semester, or when you showed up for orientation, or when you did your application for theological education. You have already been a Christian public leader, like it or not. I was a PK, pastor's kid. I kind of learned that the backwards way, that people watched me, you know, even if I didn't get paid. I didn't want to be that, but it kind of got put on me. And so I'm like, well, I better figure it out. And so I think in some ways I had to wrestle with this earlier than other people, because I was just, I knew I had a public persona. Some of you may know that. People looked at you and saw you as a Christian public leader before you really wanted to put that label on yourself. But maybe now you're going to try to say, so what does it mean? What is this version of me? What does this chapter in my Christian public leadership look like? It was really different to be a Christian public leader at a theological school than it was in a congregation. And it was really different being a Christian public leader in a synod office than it was when I was doing youth ministry and taking kids to camp. But all of that is part of this becoming. And so we want you to be thinking about Christian public leader in light of where you've been before today, and in lieu of where God might be calling you. Most immediately, you came here for a reason. You had some trajectory. And maybe the trajectory was, all right, God, you've been kicking me in the butt to get ordained, and I don't know what that is, but at least I'm going to lean into it, right? So what does that mean? Or maybe it's like, you know, that nonprofit work that that injustice I've seen, maybe you want me to kind of really be a spokesperson for that, and I feel like I need some equipping around that. Help me, right? But in light of what you kind of sense today, where God's pointing to out there, use this space to kind of be in that in-between, these Christian public leader in context courses, to wrestle with what is this journey and what chapter are you in and what might God be calling you. So I love this verse. We'll end here, sorry. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making God's appeal through us. Someone is going to hear the gospel because you showed up. I'm confident of that. And probably more than one. Right? What does it mean to lean into that calling of being an ambassador?
Amen. All right. Hey, as you walked in the room today, those of you who are here, you found a copy of the Learning Pastoral Imagination Project report, a summary report. that is certainly going to be available to all of our DL students whenever you come to campus for your intensives.
There's also a link.
Yep, right. Please stop by the Contextual Learning Office if you want a hard copy. As you all know, it was also on your on the course readings page. There's always a link for PDFs and things that we'll be using in class, and you'll find those on the course page. So we hope you found that. Some of you, I'd hate to put anybody on the spot and say, did anybody read it for today? But, oh, we had one. Perfect. That's all that I would expect on the first day of class. So just take this with you and journey with this piece for some time, because you're going to find that this is underneath a lot of what we're doing in Christian Public Leader. We got to be a part of the fun of this kind of research here at Luther and benefited from some of the grant dollars that would help us imagine why you would have a ministry practitioner come and walk alongside students in precept groups and do some creative things that kind of break down the walls between seminary life and what's going on in everyday ministry context on the front lines. So I leave that to you today as a gift as you come on your way, and go today. Those of you, again, who aren't with us today, please stop by Contextual Learning Office and we'll give you one of these books. The study, Learning Pastoral Imagination, was actually conducted by my predecessor in contextual learning, former director Chris Sharon. He was a practical theologian and professor of worship here at Luther. He has done a number of studies and worked with the Lilly Foundation, and this being one of his biggest, alongside of Eileen Campbell-Reed, a Baptist pastor, and one of our PhD students who is maybe now done with her PhD, or close, Katrina, who you might see around campus, who's wrapping up her PhD work. Now located at Auburn Seminary, a research seminary out in New York. Chris Sharon goes about his work there and is continuing to do work in research on behalf of Auburn Seminary. But this one has been particularly special for us here at Luther because the funds have been housed here since Chris was with us before. And a lot of the conversation and work groups of faculty have been a part of the development of this research project. Chris was an ethnographer, meaning he would enter into communities and listen deeply to what was going on in that particular culture and in the individual narratives of the people serving in that place. And so this is a longitudinal study. It is not done. It will not be done for some time because it keeps growing alongside of people and learning from those particular people. As you'll see that in your slides today, the Learning Pastoral Imagination Project walked alongside 50 seminarians who were in the last year of their seminary studies, and they were then launching into their first 5 years of ministry. And the goal of this study was to walk alongside them, to listen and to glean from those students what was most impactful in your theological formation in seminary and beyond. What, at the end of the day, mattered. Whether it is what you had acquired in your own skill acquisition, whether it was how your soul was tended, whether it was the particular teachers and mentors that came alongside you that really hit a chord with you and helped you begin to grasp, even if in a small way, what it means to be a pastor that shows up, to be a youth minister that shows up, or even a faculty member that shows up. Well, Craig Dykstra, who was formerly at Lilly and I believe moved now to Duke, is somebody who has done research on this. He's written on practical ministry or practical leadership for ministry. And in many ways, his work previous to Chris and Eileen's work kind of set the tone for following a plumb line all the way back to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, where he parses out wisdom and our understandings of wisdom as episteme, or the head knowledge, Sophia wisdom, theoretical wisdom, to techne, the very technical, practical wisdom and skills that might be learned. And then this other element of wisdom, this understanding of wisdom that really is bringing all of it together. And that is the practical wisdom that is formed over time and experience in particular places, in particular fields. And so you know that doctors will develop a certain kind of phronesis or wisdom over time. You have probably been treated by a doctor who knows what it means to be a doctor that shows up, that brings the best of intellect, the best of skill, but they're present. They're listening to you and they understand. And so they're showing up on message and on time with the way that they enter the room and come alongside you. So Craig Dykstra, Chris and Eileen, all of us here at Luther Seminary are wondering, what does pastoral imagination and what does pastoral phronesis, practical wisdom, look like? What does it mean to actually see the more underneath any given situation that might be unfolding in pastoral encounters that you have in the relationships in which you are called to serve and be a part of? What might it look like for you to develop not only skills, but also intuition, awareness, emotional intelligence that allows you to show up in the room? Co-director Eileen Campbell says this kind of awareness and acuity for ministry is partly intellectual, partly intuitive, and is vital to preaching, administration, pastoral care, and mission. It's a lot of practice, and that's why it takes time to develop such wisdom. So when I showed you the arc of learning around Christian Public Leader, we're just talking about a few semesters. But really, if we were to look at contextual learning's commitment to look at our wider curriculum and our faculty's commitment to contextual learning as a core piece of this curriculum, you'll find that the journey goes from Christian Public Leader into clinical pastoral education for many of you, and then for an internship, depending on your denomination, most of the students here in the ELCA will do a full year, full-time internship. And so you'll see that that element is so critical. And we want to ask the question in this study of why. Why is it so critical? One of the things that we're committed to here at Luther is to ask this question as a part of the gathering spaces here. How do I interweave classroom and contextual learning as I become a ministry leader? Who is available to reflect with me about what I am learning? I'd like to pause as those questions are before us right now. If you have not greeted the person next to you and learned their name, I'd like you to do that right now. And I'd like you to just share one or two people, probably just one is all we'll have time for, is one person that has been that theological reflection partner for you up to this point. Who's one person that's been in your, say, cloud of witnesses that has allowed you to reflect with them theologically and practically around ministry? Let's take 2 minutes. Ready? Go.
had a t-shirt in high school. There's always room for always someone who's willing to have those hard conversations. It's good at affirming my experiences and exploring questions and making me feel like
All right, about 30 more seconds, folks, 30 more seconds. All right, transition smoothly. Thank you. There are about 6 findings that came out of this study that really came to the top and are worth spending a few moments reflecting on. Do you think about the journey that you are setting out on here at Luther? And I'm sure you will recognize that some of these things have been influential in your life to date, and now you're just simply going to be more intentional in the work that you're doing and understanding why we tend to formation and why we tend to pastoral formation and skill in the way that we do here at Luther. And the first is learning pastoral imagination happens best in formation for ministry that is integrative, embodied, and relational. That may seem like a no-duh right now, but we're going to unpack in a few moments some profiles of people that were interviewed to understand that more fully. Number 2, learning pastoral imagination centers on integrated teaching that understands and articulates the challenges of the practice of ministry today. Number 3, learning pastoral imagination requires both the daily practice of ministry over time and critical moments that may arise from crisis or clarity. Number 4, learning pastoral imagination requires both apprenticeship to a situation and mentors who offer relational wisdom through shared reflection and making sense of a situation. Number 5, learning pastoral imagination is complicated by the intersection of social and personal forces of injustice. And number 6, learning pastoral imagination is needed for inhabiting ministry as a spiritual practice, opening up self and community to the presence and power of God. So there were a number of people that were highlighted in the research, and we now have this nice visual that comes with the published study to talk about some of these folks like Eve and Naomi and Melinda and Trong and James and Carlos. And I'd just like to spend a little bit of time entering into understanding about who these people are. And so number 1 is Eve. And there's actually a understanding that I have now that she was probably a Luther Seminary student, so it's kind of cool to think about how this person was developing in their time in ministry at Luther. And so learning pastoral imagination happens best in formation for ministry that is integrative, embodied, and relational. Eve, if you read into this study, will be one of the first people that shows up in the study. In fact, she kind of is a recurring person throughout, because some of her learnings were just so profound around how there was that clash of the book knowledge, the decontextualized knowledge that she was gleaning from the things that she was reading with what she was actually experiencing while she would enter into a ministry context. And so the major storyline that is laid out with Eve and her experience is how she was on CPE, clinical pastoral education, functioning as a chaplain for a summer. She noted just how powerful that clash was between what she had read about hospice ministry and pastoral care and what actually happened when she stepped across the threshold of that room where there is a dying man in a sudden kind of chaotic moment where people weren't necessarily present. His wife had dementia, the son was nervous, the daughter, who was actually a pastor, couldn't be there, and yet here Eve needed to do something, to take responsible risk with this moment What do I do? Do I gather people? Do I try to hold this off until the daughter who's a pastor can come and actually be the pastor? Or wait, it's his daughter. I mean, you know all the thoughts that go through your head while you're leading. There's so many dynamics. And so Eve was overwhelmed with this kind of thinking and trying to understand, what does it mean to show up on message and on time? And so as you read that particular encounter, you see how Eve moves through those motions of bringing her anxiety down, of reading that context, of drawing people together around the bed. And as they said the Lord's Prayer together and came to the end, Eve's reflection was, holy cow. I don't think she said cow, but she might have. Holy cow, this stuff is real. God's presence is real in this moment. And it wasn't all about Eve, and yet it was about Eve. She had to take risk. And so there are three particular pieces of that risk that are mentioned in the study. And it's what I just said about the clash of the abstract. It's so important that we have context, that we have relationships and communities where we show up as leaders, where we can test things out in those relationships and try to be good stewards of them. But we know that there is also going to be a sense of being overwhelmed. And being overwhelmed can be a good thing. In learning and growing, I think it's actually where we do some of our best work, when we're actually overwhelmed with a moment like this, where you got to step back and read the situation and then move finally towards this responsible risk that you would take of, okay, this is a time where we provide silence. This is a time where we need to just make way for people to speak or to sing or to pray. Yesterday, when our interns shared about some of their experiences, they were talking about some of the risks that they were taking. We call them whoops, wow, and wonder moments of internship. And it was really powerful. There weren't a lot of dry eyes in the room at certain points, as our interns found out that God was going to do something in spite of who they are or how they're wired, as Terry was talking about. But the one particular student talked about going on a pastoral visit for a woman who was dying. And one of the pieces that he said that just struck me as a powerful gift of pastoral wisdom, though he may be just starting out, was that he actually found this woman's two best friends in the community and brought them along for that pastoral visit. Because the supervising pastor was out of town, she's dying, he brings these two friends along. And as they get in the door and she's alerted that the intern pastor is coming, she also learns that her two best friends are there. And all of a sudden, the bursting forth of relationship and laughter and crying ensued, so that praying and sharing prayers around the bed and singing together could happen in Christian community as she prepared for the next life. This is a gift of pastoral wisdom, of living in these embodied relationships. Naomi is another person that was interviewed throughout. She was a graduate student at Vanderbilt Divinity School, and there were some denominational restrictions for her in her current faith community as an LGBTQ person. In the process of taking coursework, she discovered the power of faculty and supervisors who taught to the ministry horizon. A noticeable difference. Are you teaching because of this is your field of study, that this is your guild that you need to write for, that you need to be published? Or are you teaching to the ministry horizon? What a powerful gift that is. And we're committed to that here at Luther and discovering more together as a faculty about what that means. Time and time again in this study, students talked about that professor that was just available before or after class. And some of the most impactful conversations had to do with practical ministry experiences that that professor has had in the past, or ways that they brought in voices from outside of the community here on the campus and did role playing in the classroom, or they went on immersion trips. Like Guillermo Hansen, one of our professors, said, I want to work with contextual learning to do a world religions course where you help me get us out into houses of worship across all of the world religions that we have here in the Twin Cities. And so we partnered together around that because of Guillermo's creativity and commitment to teaching pedagogy. Well, this was important to Naomi. She discovered that. And we're finding that this is important to all students in formation. Now, the other piece that was really impactful for Naomi was this idea of the action reflection learning. And that's one of the core commitments, as we mentioned, to this course and to your precepts after this month, going into next month, where we're going to establish a rhythm of doing and being and thinking. Doing, being, thinking. And the particular tool that we're going to use is from Rick Osmer at Princeton. And we're not even going to dive into this today. It's on that rubric for the precept paper writing. And these are going to be the 4 steps that you are going to be thinking about and actually employing as you're in your ministry context.
It's the reading for next month.
It is the reading for next month as well. So we'll drill down next month and start practicing and working with this tool. There's also Melinda, Finding 3. Learning pastoral imagination requires both the daily practice of ministry over time and critical moments that arise from crisis and clarity. I love how Melinda represents what is so important. Dave said that there's no such thing as failure in contextual learning. There's only the failure to learn. We hope there's a whole lot of failure that goes on in all of your leadership in contextual learning, because we know that it's when we come up short.
Tweet that. Tim,
Tweet it out.
that.
I said it.
I hope that there's a lot of failure.
When we're coming up short, this is often times where we're stretching internally the most. Where we're starting to realize that there are different ways to do things, or a way that I should have or could have done this differently and had some different outcomes. And as you read into this study, Melinda shares some really honest and humbling experiences with that foot washing service on Maundy, Thursday, where you do hand washing, you do all sorts of creative things, trying to make this text come to life in this worship experience, and she had everything just fall apart, only to find out that a little girl was watching her from the congregation and starting to formulate her own ideas about whether she could be a pastor someday, and started practicing when she got home, and her parent passed that on to Pastor Melinda. We never know when we show up what God is up to. Trong was a person who is in the business world, corporate environment, doing all sorts of jobs, bringing his gifts for skill and teamwork. So Trong was very gifted. He also had a heart for ministry, and probably is representative of the church of the future in many ways, because he believed he was wired to do both things. To be working in particular businesses that he believed in, that he was a part of, as well as developing this deep sense of vocation for ministry. And so he found multiple mentors that would both be mentoring him in this corporate sphere as well as in his ministry understanding. And so he would do both, and he would do it successfully. But it wouldn't come without having that relational wisdom that comes from mentors who are willing to step back with you, to do some 360 work, to ask what is God up to in the midst of that. It's our hope that your CPL mentor is going to be that person at least once a month, where you're able to have that conversation where you step back and you ask some of those bigger questions, or maybe some of those questions that have to do more with you and how you're showing up in ministry context. And so we're going to be meeting with those mentors and preparing them to think about what it means to journey with you and do that apprenticing work. We don't want to lose apprenticing culture. In many ways, that's the culture Jesus came from. the dust of the rabbi, following the rabbi around, and learning by watching and then eventually doing. James was a powerful story within this study about somebody who grew up in the South, African American, grew up mostly in all-white schools, and talks about actually some of the most painful experiences of being on sports teams and a variety of other places where he just felt called out, he was made fun of, he had all sorts of wounds that came in his childhood that actually into adulthood would become a way for him to understand more deeply what God was calling him to do and to be. It was actually that intersection of social and personal forces of injustice that were giving James a deep sense of his calling.
You're going to lose your power.
Well, I don't want to lose power.
Power of the Holy Spirit will take over.
I think we're okay. We're down to the last few minutes. So James, and some of the work he was doing at Memphis Theological Seminary, found himself writing about and exegeting the text on the wedding feast, where the poor and the lame, those who are left out, were suddenly, he understood, the very people that they don't have in their church, in the community in which he was serving. He realized we have exclusively left out the very people that are feeling the way I felt when I was on the bus with all of those kids and being called out and made fun of and being left behind. And it was that deep sense of injustice and passion that was burning in his belly and in his bones that would give him his sense of a prophetic call to do something differently in a church that had just fallen asleep in doing the same conventional thing with the same people. And so all sorts of loan programs, microloans, and food scarcity programs started to be born out of this church that had people all around that weren't seen before. They were invisible until James came along and brought his personal story into that community. We are blessed with CPL leaders around us like Chris Bingia Olson at First Lutheran in St. Paul that are doing this very work of asking who are the invisible people in this neighborhood and why aren't we talking with them and inviting them to the wedding feast. And lastly, Carlos is another bivocational minister who realized that he can't do this work unless he is first feeding his own soul. And so Carlos is somebody who is working outside of the church and inside of the church, finds himself looking for other people like you will be finding in your precept group, looking for networks, looking for people at the local seminary in New York where he lives, where he can find a place to tend to his spirit, believing that if we are going to be spiritual leaders for other people, we first need to tend to the spirit within. And that commitment was consistent across the Learning Pastoral Imagination project. And so as they actually did their listening sessions with this group of 50 people, they would gather around a spiritual formation practice, as you will be doing in your precept groups, before they enter into the reflection and thinking about what God is up to. And so as we go on this journey together this semester, we give you this study to think about, to reflect on, to bring with you for the journey ahead. But we want to start this next week or this next month simply by entering in to knowing you more fully. We want to hear your call stories. Believe it or not, there's somebody in this room that actually their call story had to do with the Green Bay Packers winning a football game. And I'm a Vikings fan, so I'm having a hard time believing it right now, but it's really true. And maybe by the end of the semester, you'll find out who it is. So there are some exciting stories, some amazing people that are sitting next to you today. And we get to go deep and dive into what God is up to in this place at this time. And we give thanks to God for that. Terry, any closing comments before we head off to chapel?
Go in peace, serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thursdays will be Christian Public Leader Chapel, and we want to invite you as much as you can to come on over and bring a friend, because we're going to bring in outside preachers and speakers from our community starting next week. And today you have to put up with a preacher that looks a lot like me. So, see you there.
Or is you?
Oh, yeah.